Hey guys, welcome to a very exciting game of the Tata Steel Rapid and Blitz tournament that is going on in Kolkata right now. And this game is from round 4 and it's between Carlsen and Nakamura. So before we get into the game, I want to show you a few pictures. This is a wonderful and interesting picture from the first ping ball test that India is ever playing, and this is a cricket match that is going on currently in Kolkata as well. So you have Magnus Carlsen and Vishwanathan Anand that are ringing the bell of the second day of the 5-day test match that is ongoing. So pretty interesting and amazing personalities featuring in the very first ping ball test game, which is pretty cool. So the second picture you have is from the same game, from the same test match, and here as you can see, Magnus Carlsen is busy watching the game, and Vishwanathan Anand has just finished his autograph, or probably he is just taking the autograph page from this young kid, and he wants to sign it. So pretty interesting. Then you have Magnus Carlsen here, who is trying out his football skills, and you have another picture of Magnus doing the same. And then you have a picture of Magnus versus Nakamura. This was after the end of the game, so they're just shaking the hands as one of the players have resigned. So let's get into the game. And as you can see here, Magnus has the white pieces and Nakamura has the black pieces. We have c4 on the board, an English opening, and Magnus really enjoys playing English opening, so he usually tends to go for that opening as well. You have e5 in response, pretty standard response, and now knight to c3. You have knight to f6, knight to f3, knight to c6, d3, d5, now c takes d5, knight takes d5, and e4. Pretty interesting position, as most of the times here knight takes c3 followed by pawn takes c3. You get bishop to c5 and usually rook to b1. This is pretty standard variation in this opening, but Nakamura deviates from this opening and he plays knight to f4. So not going for the captures, but playing knight to f4. And this is a pretty interesting position, as this gives a lot of advantage to Magnus. And he immediately capitalizes on it. We have bishop takes f4, e takes f4, and d4. You have bishop to d6, making sure this pawn is defended, and simply h3. You have castles by Nakamura, and you have a3, a6, and now bishop to c4. King to h8 and simply e5. King to h8 has to be played because you want to push this pawn forward and try to break open any of White's advancement of the pawn. And when you do that, you don't really want to have a king here on g8. That is, this bishop is eyeing the wonderful diagonal. So you don't really want that to happen, which is why proactively Nakamura moved his king to h8. And after the pawn pushing, we have bishop to e7, retreating with the bishop, defending itself, and now d5, pushing the second pawn even further. And again, you cannot really capture any of the pawns because they are pretty nicely defended. So early on in the game, we have Carlsen, who has the initiative, and you know Carlsen, he will not let go of the initiative if you give it to him. So you have to be very careful when you play with this champion. You have knight to a5, now attacking the bishop, and bishop simply retreats to a2. b5, trying to create some counterplay on the queen side, but you simply have castles by Magnus, and now you have a wonderful position where all of Magnus's pieces are developed. This queen has to develop, and then these rooks will be connected to each other, so it's completely fine. Whereas Nakamura has some shortcomings. You have to develop the bishop. This bishop is kind of stuck here on this diagonal. Cannot really go to any of these squares, as you don't really know what it's going to control. And from here, this knight here on a5 is not really doing anything. It has to go back to b7. and try to remaneuver itself. So it's a pretty weird knight that's here on a5. But anyways, you have f6 and now b4, trying to push this knight even further back, and knight to c4. Instead, trying to get it to a wonderful square, closing down this bishop's diagonal. And you have bishop takes c4, b takes c4, but look at this pawn structure. It's really bad for Nakamura because these two pawns are way too forward and they will fall pretty soon. You have e6, and now simply bishop to b7, attacking this pawn, but for now it's nicely defended, so you don't really have to worry. And queen to d4, immediately attacking both of these pawns, so there is not much you can do to capitalize on the situation. Even to simply defend it, this is not possible, because then you will break the pawn chain and you will have a pretty weird structure, and it's not really something that you want to do. So you have c6, trying to get some counterplay and trying to get these at least one of these strong forward pawns off the board. And you have queen takes c4, c takes d5, and now queen takes f4. Both these pawns eliminated, and there is nothing Nakamura could have done about that. Rook to c8, trying to put the rook on the only open file that is on the board. And now knight to e2. You have bishop to d6, attacking the queen, and simply queen to e3. And this queen to e3 moves is a multi-purpose move. Now you are defending this wonderful d4 square 3 times, and you are not really allowing this pawn to be ever pushed, because there is no way you can push this pawn. So this d pawn is kind of stuck here on d5 for the rest of the game, till this situation is completely won by Magnus, and that's what is going to happen. You have a5, pushing the pawn and trying to create something. Now you simply have knight e to d4 and rook to e8. Knight to f5, attacking the bishop, and simply bishop to b8, retreating. Rook a to c1, and now rook to c4. Now you have knight d5, knight f5 to d4, and you get a takes b4, a takes b4, and now bishop to a7. Simply trying to pin this knight to the square, but this doesn't really work, mainly because this knight is nicely defended by the second knight as well, so you don't really have to worry about that. And instead of this, what could have been played was simply rook takes. I have to go back a move, so simply rook takes b4, and then you would play rook takes rook to b1. Then you can also have queen to b6, you have rook takes rook, and now queen takes rook here, and this is a completely fine position, after which you can, if you want, you can put this bishop here and have a wonderful game. But Nakamura prematurely played bishop to a7, and this allows a pretty interesting tactic from Magnus. It starts with b5. And now the threat is obviously pushing this pawn to getting a queen into the game. And now simply you have bishop to c5. You get queen to d3, and now queen to b6, not allowing this pawn to be pushed any further. Now you have rook takes c4, d takes c4, and simply queen takes c4. You have eliminated a pawn, and now you are nicely defending this pawn as well. You get bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, and simply rook takes e6. Now you have g3 and simply rook to e8, going back with the rook, not allowing any back rank weaknesses. You have king to g2 and simply rook to b8. Now going after this pawn, finally you're going to capture this pawn, but rook to c1. Now if you capture the pawn, of course your bishop is hanging here, so you have to first save your bishop. Bishop to f8, and now knight to d4, again nicely defending this pawn. So a wonderful move by Carlsen. If you go back a few moves after king to g2 and rook to b8, this was pretty interesting. If you prematurely move this prematurely move this knight anywhere, you're just going to get knight capture. So you cannot really defend this pawn immediately, which is why rook to c1 was played. Now you have to go back with the bishop, and then you have knight to d4. Now you can nicely defend it. So this is how grandmasters maneuver their pieces, and that is exactly what we all have to learn from them. I mean, if I was there in this position, previous position, I would have simply played rook to b1, trying to defend it and then get some captures going, and I would have lost this position. But Magnus, because he's a grandmaster, and that is why he's a grandmaster, played rook to c1. Pretty amazing move. So after that we have h5, and we have knight to e6. Now attacking your bishop. Bishop goes to a3, and again rook to c3. Now again attacking your bishop. Bishop to b4. And this is a pretty interesting move. What happens if you capture this piece that is hanging? That's what it feels like, right? So let's see what happens if you capture this this bishop here. Then you simply get queen captures on e6, which is what was played in the game. So you basically traded off the bishop for this knight here, and which is completely fine in this position. Now you have rook to c5, defending this pawn, and simply queen to f7, queen to f4, rook to d8, and now queen to f3, keeping a nice support of this wonderful b7 square. You have g6 and b6. Now you're ready to push the pawn even further. You have rook to d7, as you cannot really allow this pushing, and simply rook to c8 with a check, king to g7, and now queen to c6. Now you are attacking this rook, so you cannot really move your queen, and you have to keep this rook on the 7th file, because then you get a threat of this pawn being pushed and getting a queen into the game. So pretty crazy position, and this is why Magnus is a very amazing attacking chess player. You have king to h6, h4, f5, rook to c7, and finally queen to d5 with a check. You have to trade off the queens. Queen takes d5, rook takes d5, b7, and now rook to b5 and f4. And this was the final position on the board, as Nakamura realized there is nothing much he can do. So he resigned in this position. This is move 51, and Magnus Carlsen won an amazing attacking game. And I'm going to show you the reason why Nakamura resigned. That was because he knew what followed was rook to b3. You're going to get king to f2. You're simply going to march up the board with your king all the way up to c8 square, and then nicely go and defend this queening square. You are going to bring the queen into the game. Black has to give up the rook for the queen, and then this will be checkmate pretty easily. So I'm just going to play out this variation. You have rook to b5, king to e2, rook to b1, king to d3, rook to b5, king to c4, rook to b1, king to c5, rook c1 check, king to b6, rook b1 check, king to c6, rook c1 check, king to d7, rook d1 check, king to c8. Finally, you cannot give any more checks to the king. Rook to b1 and simply b8, bringing a queen into the game. Rook takes b8, king takes b8, and now finally you have to play g5. You get f takes g5, and now king to g6. Your king cannot even enter into this position, mainly because this rook nicely cuts off the king from the 7th rank, and your pawn nicely cuts off this king from entering into any of these squares. So there is nothing you can do in this position. You have rook to c6 with a check, king to h7, and now your king cannot even enter 6th rank, so it has to stay on the 7th rank. You simply get rook to f6, king to g7, and now king to c7. You're finally going to bring your king closer, and you're going to checkmate this king, and there is nothing for black to do. king to g8, king to d7, king to g7, king to e7, king to g8, rook to g6 with a check, king to h8, king to f7, and now because your king cannot really move from here, you have to play f4 and rook to h6, and this is checkmate. So a wonderful game by Carlsen and Nakamura in this Tata Steel Rapid and Blitz tournament. And Carlsen, after round 6, is the leader of the pack. That's it from this video. I would like to thank all my subscribers for subscribing to the channel. I greatly appreciate your support, and you are the reason why I keep making these videos. So thank you so much for that. If you have any questions, comments or concerns, please let me know in the comment section below, or you can email it to me as well. My email address is given in the description below. That's it from the video. Namaste. See you next time.